So let me just start out and ask you, Senator, in the minutes we have here, to lay out what was achieved in the debt ceiling deal in permitting reform, because most of that is credited with language you wrote and proposed, and what was not achieved that you feel is still a national priority.
Let's go back from the beginning, how all this started. Why do we even do an IRA? Why was it even needed? BBB just got killed 3 months prior to that, and it was just overreaching as far as I was concerned. But then Ukraine war started and got extremely heated. Putin weaponized energy and made it very difficult for our EU allies, and we didn't have the energy to help them. We couldn't come to their aid. Thank God it wasn't a really severe winter, or they'd really been in trouble. So all this started culminating, and I thought, something's got to be done. No one's talking about energy, and you have to have energy. You have to be energy independent to have energy security to be a superpower of the world. And if you can't help your allies and your friends when they're in trouble, they're going to go find help somewhere else. And I was afraid we were driving them towards other parts of the world that wasn't going to have the same values we had. All that being said, I said, we got to do something. So Schumer said to me, he says, you just killed the BBB. And I said, Chuck, that was an overreaching situation. I would try for 8 months and we had a good understanding. I couldn't get there. I'm sorry. You're going to have to go out and elect a lot more liberals than me to get something like that passed. So anyway, we got to that point, and then I said, he said, well, you're an energy chairman, why don't you write the bill? I said, I can write a bill, you won't like it. I said, the difference between what some people in our government think that you can eliminate your way to a cleaner environment. I think you have to innovate your way to a cleaner environment. You can't eliminate it because people will not follow. Different parts of the world will not follow if they have energy in their backyard. Teach them how to use it more responsibly and more environmentally friendly. That's where I was coming from versus where they were. And we started writing the bill, but we wrote it kind of in secrecy because we didn't think they'd ever pass it or accept it. Never thought that they would ever accept it, the administration. So in doing that, that was March, April, May. By June, I think inflation had gone to 9.1%. Fuel was at $4 and going higher. Everything was going the wrong direction. The president's poll numbers were extremely low. So people were saying, well, you got anything? And I said, well, I've got something. I said, I'm not sure you're going to like it. I said, I have an energy security bill that says that we're going to produce fossil fuels to be more independent and cleaner than anywhere in the world. We have the resources, let's do it. And with that, we'll invest into the technologies for the future. We can do both. We can walk and chew gum. That was the premise of how you got the IRA. All about energy security. And
permitting.
Well, permitting is part of it. From day one, you can't do what needs to be done to be energy secured unless you can get the electrons where they're needed. And you can't do that unless you have the pipelines and you have transmission. So it was all inclusive, the whole thing. And that was all part of it. MVP, how an MVP came into play, it was the only pipeline, it was the only energy resource that could put 2 billion cubic feet into the market within 6 months. It was the only thing in the country. So we needed more energy. That's how it came. They said, well, it's a project of mine. It just happened to basically, we have the largest shale play in the world almost, in the Marcellus and Utica shale. So we got an ocean of energy underneath of us. Now I was trying to explain when all that happened is that basically 8 years ago this started. This didn't happen and it wasn't anything was bypassed. MVP has had 6 NEPA reviews. It's been 8 years in the making. Why don't you go ahead and close that door? Come on in. Come on in, there's plenty of room.
Justin, close the door, please.
That's Jim. And then we had NEPA was done 6 times. FERC looked at it 3 different times because
Jim, let's come in and close the door.
Come on in. Come on, Jim. Come on up front. Get Jim up here. Anyway, what happens with FERC, if you don't have a customer base or a need for the product, you can't get a permit. Can't even start a permit. 3 times they reviewed this and said of national interest, that fuel was needed in the marketplace. So it's gone through every review humanly possible, 9 times before the 4th Circuit. Just couldn't get it done. Just could not. And that's what's happened to so many. And that's the same as happened in transmission lines.
So one of the questions I have is when the IRA passed, and you and I talked about this, we interviewed
everything
before,
was in
that the permitting piece was not supposed to be a second piece, but it had to be processed legislatively.
Well, we had.
Yeah, you had to go through that. You had Nancy Pelosi, you had Chuck Schumer,
everybody
you had Joe Biden,
off.
Everybody was on board, and yet it failed. And it failed largely, in part because of in the House and Progressive side, but it also failed in the Senate in partisan ways.
The politics that happened there, Steve, was Mitch McConnell got so irate because we did a piece of legislation that looked like it could be such a success. Okay, and here, and I'm not saying just one, but he was really upset because every time I'd come to the floor, he says, "You're not going to do a BBB, are you? You're not going to do another BBB." I said, "BBB's dead and buried, okay?" I said, "But if I get a chance to do energy security, I'm going to do it." Now, if you look at the politics, what these people just did today helps me tremendously in my state. Honest to God, it's sad to say, but
You want me to invite him in?
you got more upset than I did.
Big time.
But the bottom line is these type of things here, because they're wanting elimination. And they're saying, well, they're taking people's land. They've been paid for that land was bought and purchased 8 years ago. There's right-of-ways. And some right-of-ways, more than fair market values. I mean, mostly it's outside people who are making more complaints than the people that basically, that as the pipeline is going to be going through the properties or whatever. And if it's done properly, and this company will do it properly, when you go through the mountainous and some of the forested areas, if you want wildlife and habitat, you have to basically replant those areas. If you've ever been a hunter, you're always hunting close to the right-of-ways because that's where the animals will come out and feed. That's just the way it goes. So anyway, this can be done in a very, I think, a very good way. The bottom line is that we have a situation right now where you have the country divided, thinking of what's going to be what you want and what you need. Well, they out of sight, out of mind. I'll give you a perfect example. You want to go to EVs? They start pushing cars and we can't even make a car now unless it's relied on foreign supply chains. We've never been in that position. The United States of America has always been able to take care of its transportation mode. Whether it's cars, trains, and planes, we've been able to build it and innovate and create everything right here in North America. Now we can't. And I told him, I said, I think you're crazy moving that fast when you don't have anything at all that we can basically do it without relying, especially on China, has 80% of the market captured. So they said, well, what would you do? I said, I'm not going to give you 75 cents credit, let alone $7,500. And we fought back and forth for about 2 months. And it's almost like the Ford and General Motors and all of our manufacturers were so upset that they almost had to have $7,500 into their marketing scheme of how they're going to market this new product. And I said, it's a good product. EV, electrical vehicles, are wonderful. I said, they got plenty of power. They're all these things that you might want. But I said, you're forcing people to move in that direction. And then they were coming out with EPA with a tailpipe rule that basically said we're going to outlaw combustible engines. Are you out of your mind? We're not able to do what needs to be done yet, but we can. So I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you $37.50 credit if you source rare earth minerals and process them. If you're able to source and process them in North America or in free trade agreement countries. So the biggest problem we have made over the years is we've relied on supply chains for countries that do not have our same values. Putin held energy as a weapon. He weaponized energy, and I'll guarantee you, Xi Jinping is watching every maneuver, and he'll weaponize all the critical stuff that we use from them, that we've turned over to them and quit manufacturing. So I said, you got to come back to America. I said, you get the other $37.50 if you manufacture it in North America, the car and the battery. The thing that I've had a problem with the administration is that through the Treasury Department, they're liberalizing their interpretation of how they're implementing the way the rule was written.
Are they allowed to do that?
They can try, okay? And basically they're saying, well, we have this and that, and they'll find something that says we can do this. I said, listen, you can't on processing, because on processing and manufacturing, we wrote manufacturing, so the wafers and the powders and all that had to be part of the manufacturing in North America. We're a couple years away from getting there. We let that go offshore, so we got to work like the dickens to get it back quicker. They want to basically consider processing and manufacturing as the same. So they're saying, well, you can go out and buy across the world the processing, which is part of the manufacturing. That's where we're in it. That's in the weeds. But that's why they've accelerated, and they're just about doubling the cost. Let me just tell you something that I was so upset about. If you want to know how
just real quick, is the Biden administration living up to the IRA as it was written?
No.
Or are they
not with the pricing.
Yeah.
They're doing what we've said needs to be done. We're permitting more. We're producing more fossil fuel. We're back to 12.5 million barrels a day. We're up to 30 of oil. We're up to 37 trillion cubic feet a year in gas. We have now about 13.5 billion cubic feet of LNG going out into the marketplace to our supporters and mostly to our allies, and we're upping that. That's moving in the right direction, because we forced them to do the leasing they were not doing. They were setting on it, not doing it. So that's you got to stay on top of it, but that's working. The other that we're having is how they might be liberalizing basically the intent. Well, here's what I'm telling you about money. That bill was $689 billion. That was the total cost of the bill. That's how much money we could raise in 10 years. Most of that came from the 15% minimum corporate tax that a lot of the larger corporations, $100 billion or more of assets, weren't paying. So with that, you would think, okay, 10 years, we got 10 years of revenue. Then we should be able to keep these programs for 10 years.
Please welcome to the stage Justin Smith, co-founder and chief executive officer of Semafor.
I usually don't read the DC.
When it rains, it pours, doesn't it? Anyway, let me just tell you how this works. That $369 billion is what we had for energy.
Josh, this is serious. Get this off.
All of you to this morning's program and thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's great. 369 billion, what was left basically just for the energy portion. That's supposed to last you 10 years. If the administration continues as they want to continue and started, allowing a lot of these people to get $7,500 for a car, that we shouldn't be giving that type of credit until we start producing.
Right.
It's going to do two things. First of all, it expedites us getting into manufacturing back in America quicker, because there's an incentive to do it. And if you don't, there won't be an incentive to do it. And so that they almost doubled the cost. So what happens is, if you want to know how you got $31.5 trillion in the shortest period of time in the history of our great country of 247 years, it's because we tell you, okay, this bill, we've got I'm going to use a trillion. You have $1 trillion.
Yeah.
That's over 10 years. Now what will happen is, what they don't tell you is that everything they have in that bill will not be costed for 10 years. It's only costed 2 years here, 3 years here, maybe 5 years here. So you run out. You run out. All your money is used on the front end, and then how do you finance it? Well, two things have to happen. Either you go back and get more appropriation, which you won't because it's politically charged, or the public becomes so enamored with it and they love it, they won't let it go, so you'll end up debt financing it. So if you wonder why you're pouring on debt at a quicker period of time, it's because of the games being played with the cost of the bills. So that's why I'm upset about it.
So let's get a little bit on the next steps in permitting. So you got NEPA review time limits, and court enforced, which is has not been part of the game before, so court enforced, and some other major permitting accomplishments in this debt ceiling deal. But I heard both from Ro Khanna and Nancy Mace they didn't like that kind of. But nonetheless, that's what's happened. What has not happened in permitting that you would like to see you and your Senate colleagues, both sides of the aisle, put forward in a standalone bill? What are the key headlines?
I think more certainty and longevity in how we do things in what period of time. Okay, a lot of this stuff's going to be contested. We know that, and it's going to go to the courts and it'll end up in the Supreme Court. The quicker the better, as far as I'm concerned, finding out where we stand. The worst thing about anything, if you're doing a project and you start down this project and you're led to believe, okay, yeah, we have a need for what you want. You start down the process, you start spending 100 million here, and then the billions pops up and 2 billion pops up, and you're down the road 4 and 5 years. You've gone through all of the agencies, and lo and behold, as soon as you think you're ready to go, you get taken to court. And there's something. It's going back through the process again, and it goes back again. What we've been able to do is take a lead agency. I want a lead agency. So if it's going to be transmission and transmission and pipelines, it should be FERC. FERC should be your shepherd. It takes all the other agencies and you start all at one time. You cut that process down to 2 years, maybe 3 years max. The developed world, basically, they're all trying for 3 years or less. We're 5 to 10 and longer.
How are you on FERC right now? You haven't been too high on that.
Well, let me tell you one thing. Willie Phillips is the real deal. He's the new chairman, and he's put it together and got a working relationship there with the Democrats and Republicans that are making things happen. They're looking at it very practical. An EIS is an environmental impact study, which could take up to 2 years or more. An ES is just an environmental study that says, go back and check this. You can get through that pretty quick and back into the game. So before, everything that came back, if you did everything the way you thought, but you might have not crossed this T or dot this I, or you left one review out, they make you go back through an EIS completely and go through the system again. Those type of things don't happen in developed nations, and it shouldn't happen in ours. So we're changing all of that. Okay, transmission. Right now, the big thing is, I come from a fossil state, okay, and a lot of people in my state believe that the more transmission you do is to bring on more renewables and zero carbon. It's not to basically support the fossil industry. That's not accurate, and I try to explain to them. We're not moving the electrons we're producing now. We're just not moving. There is 2 million megawatts of power that's sequestered right now. It's in the queue. Can't get in the system. It cannot. There's no capacity in the line. Now, the biggest problem that we have, and we went through all this, is a lot of my Republican friends are saying, wait a minute, cost allocation. Well, I can tell you, I'm a net producer of power in West Virginia, so I'm sending out more power than we're consuming. So if you want to bring a line that happens to go through West Virginia, why should the ratepayers in West Virginia be saddled with any cost at all? So allocation of cost, thought we worked through that. Unless you can show that you have a need, that you have a void, and just
So users pay.
So the users only should pay if they need it.
Okay.
Not if they don't need it. So we think we got that.
And is the GOP opposed to that?
No. We worked on that. That was,
Okay.
I think that's what will be in the next bill. The biggest problem that we have is states' rights. Okay. You're coming through now. You're going to tell me that you're going to put a power line through my FERC is the same way that the highway system, the interstate system probably got built and the interstate pipelines got built. Now all of a sudden of national interest. We have to build this line for national interest. But still yet we wanted to give state rights. How could we do that? We came up with what we said, we're going to give you 1 year. So if you're coming through the state of North Carolina and Duke Energy, and they have a wonderful system, they've been very reliable, but they're not too anxious about getting more competition coming in through transmission. Then basically, Duke Energy should be allowed to work with the PSC. So FERC just can't come in and push it through. FERC has to come in and give it to the local PSC from the state, and that state PSC has to work with the local supplier who owns the transmission, and see if they want to accept this power, if they want to build their grid system out, or if they can handle their own grid. Gives them 1 year to work it out. To me, that's more than reasonable. If you can't work out and people you've been working with forever, PSC, then you have to make a decision. That's not a good investment for us to go let them come ahead. Then FERC can move with it after 1 year. That was what we had worked out and didn't get into this bill, no transmission, so we'll see.
You know, you're famous for sitting down with people you disagree with you.
I was trying to sit down and talk to them.
Yeah.
They didn't want to hear what I had to say.
Maybe after.
Sure.
But I'm interested, because you, during Build Back Better, you sat down with Pramila Jayapal. You had an open line to Ro Khanna. So, now Ro loved the IRA, didn't support the permitting. But if you're to sit down with folks that represent those concerned with climate change, what's going on, and essentially a progressive environmental agenda, and talk to them about what the equilibrium needs to be and why it's so important. You were to have that dinner. It was off the record at Cafe Milano. What's that conversation going to look like?
We got a lot of them, haven't we?
No comment.
The first thing is when I deal with whether it be the far left or the far right, if you don't sit down and just have a dialogue and try to have some communication, I can't figure out what they're so concerned about and what they might have a better idea than I have. I've lived by one premise my whole life. I've never met the first person's always wrong. Think about that. I have never met the first person's always wrong. Now, I might have walked away thinking they were that because I didn't take enough time to find out what they had to share with me. Okay, and that's what happens. Sometimes you walk away too soon. So with that being said, I could sit down, and then once I knew that in my mind that we had something that was not, they weren't not going to listen because they were entrenched. But once I knew that we were protecting what they were concerned about, or they still had access, then I felt that we have a good balanced piece of legislation, and I'd go on with it. So
let me just ask you finally, what's your gut on achieving something real in a permitting reform in this next session? And do you see the leaders out there? So right now you see the cast of folks that are competing for the GOP presidential nomination.
Sure.
You see the president. Do you like any of them?
I like all of them.
I mean, do you think any of them?
I know them all.
Do you think they'd be good presidents? Do you think they have the right leadership?
I think everyone, you get the right team around you, you can do unbelievable things. Okay, I don't need to tell any leader in this room. You get the right team, you become a superstar. Okay, so it depends on who's picking the right people.
Would they do as well as you would?
I think everybody has that opportunity. Everybody. I've been very blessed with a great team. I really have. But I think that you have to lead the team. They have to know exactly what you want and why you're doing it. Public service is truly it's a calling. Self-service is an ambition. And people that are in self-service usually don't get the best teams or stay for the best reason. Public service is a calling. You'll probably stay the route. And people can read through that. I've always said in West Virginia, they can shake your hand, look in your eyes, and see your soul. You can't BS them. You just can't. They have to live by their gut. And with that being said, it's a pretty good gut. It keeps you humble. I just think there's a lot, if we don't get it done before the end of the year, it might be a hard lift next year. We're going really in a hard cycle of presidential elections. But they're all tough. Right now, once you announce that you're running, you're back in you're a target. You're a really known target. I'm in that limbo where they don't know what I'm going to do, if I'm going to do anything, this or that. But I got so much more to do. And I says, only in America do you start the next election the day after the last election. And I'm just not going to subscribe to that, because I'll miss this whole year of getting something accomplished for my reason and purpose of being here, and I just won't do it.
Well, as you know, I asked Senator Manchin a couple of months ago, and I see Sam Runyon here as communicator. So we cooked this up months ago, not knowing that kind of we would be right in the sweet spot of where everybody in the world would be interested in permitting reform.
Well,
Thank you for trusting us to do this, and thank you for coming in and having a candid talk with us about this. And I'm sure you're going to have lots of opportunities to speak with the crowd that wanted to be heard here today.
Well, there's going to, this is the life we live, and this is part of public service. Now, the nice thing would be is if they would call the office and say, "Can we come in?" I said, "Sure, bring 5 or 6 people, we'll sit down." I've always done that. Open up. Let me hear what you're concerned about. Tell me on the people that lost any land that it wasn't put back better and they were more compensated than they were before. Show me that. Let me tell you another thing. I never knew this before. This line is 303 miles long, the MVP. 283 has already been laid and buried. 170 miles of it has been totally reclaimed. Another 100 miles has not been reclaimed, and they're getting all these suits against them continuously, day after day. And I'm saying, why? And they said, because the last court injunction will not let us go back and put any equipment in there to fix what we want to fix until we're back to operating again. So it's a catch-22. So the bottom line is, let's see the finished product and see what's there, and I'll guarantee you, I think we'll all be better off.
Well, Senator, thank you for today.
Okay.
I'm going to basically, for our video, say thank you to everyone for joining us for Semafor's Permitting Reform Summit. Thank you very much for joining us, and I know Sam's going to grab you and get you out of the door.
Well, thank you all for being so kind.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.